Imagine walking into a restaurant expecting laughter, only to leave with tears in your eyes, because a single moment changed everything. This is not just a story, it's a journey that will remind you never to judge a person by their job title, their clothes, or their silence. Stay with me until the very end, because what happened that night left an entire room breathless, and it might change the way you see people forever. And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. The evening started with a cruel kind of excitement. A group of young office workers had gathered in a fancy restaurant, dressed in their best, laughing at their own cleverness. They had arranged a blind date for their colleague, a woman named Clara, who had been lonely for far too long. But instead of setting her up with someone thoughtful or kind, they decided to play a joke. They invited the janitor from their office, a quiet man named Samuel. Samuel was in his late 30s, always moving silently with his mop and bucket, nodding politely when spoken to, never intruding, never demanding attention. He wore faded shirts, heavy work boots, and his hands were always rough from cleaning chemicals. Few people knew much about him. And that made him an easy target. Clara arrived, dressed beautifully, nervous but hopeful. She had no idea of the cruel setup. She sat at the table, waiting, while her so-called friends stifled laughter from across the room, watching. Then Samuel walked in. He wore a jacket that had clearly been brushed clean but was old, his tie slightly crooked, his shoes shined as best as he could manage. He looked around, uncertain, until he saw Clara. Her smile faltered. She was expecting someone different, someone who fit the picture of romance in her mind. The group behind her chuckled, whispering. One even pulled out a phone to record the moment. Clara felt her cheeks burn as Samuel sat down, nervous but trying to smile. "Hi," he said softly, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I wasn't sure if you'd want me here." Clara's first instinct was to leave. But something in his eyes, tired, but kind, made her pause. Still, the weight of humiliation pressed on her shoulders. She knew people were watching. She picked up her glass, forcing a smile. "Well, let's see how it goes." The meal began awkwardly. Clara struggled between embarrassment and guilt, and Samuel did his best to keep the conversation light. He asked her about her work, her interests, listened intently when she spoke. There was no arrogance, no self-importance, only respect. But the laughter from across the room was hard to ignore. Each giggle and whisper made Clara's heart sink deeper into shame, not for herself, but for the man sitting across from her who clearly knew he was being mocked. Halfway through the dinner, one of the friends couldn't resist. He walked up to the table, smirking. "Clara, didn't know you liked janitors. Guess he cleans up well, huh?" The table of friends roared with laughter. Clara's face turned crimson. But Samuel didn't flinch. He simply looked at the man and said nothing. The quiet in his gaze was more cutting than any words. The friend, unsettled, mumbled something and walked back. Clara wanted to sink through the floor. Then, just when it seemed the night could not get worse, a hush fell over the restaurant. The owner, followed by a well-dressed man with commanding presence, walked straight toward their table. The group of friends froze mid-laughter. Clara glanced back, confused. The man stopped at their table and extended his hand toward Samuel. "Good evening, Mr. Hart," he said with the utmost respect. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." The room fell silent. Clara blinked, her heart pounding. "Mr. Hart?" Samuel stood, shaking the man's hand firmly. His voice was calm, steady, but carried authority this time. "Just having dinner, but it seems I've attracted some attention." He glanced at the group of friends, and they shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The man nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, addressing the restaurant, "you may not know this, but you are in the presence of the CEO of Hart Industries, the company that owns several of the buildings in this city, including the one many of you work in. Gasps echoed across the room. Clara's mouth went dry. Samuel, her blind date, the man mocked as just a janitor, was in fact the owner of the very company that employed them all. The friends, who had arranged the cruel prank, looked pale, their laughter long gone. Phones slipped back into pockets. Not a sound came from their table anymore. Samuel looked at Clara, then at the group. "Funny thing about people," he said slowly. "They often assume they know who you are by what you wear, or what they think your role is. But respect shouldn't be based on job titles. Respect should be unconditional." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She realized how wrong she had been to hesitate, how close she came to joining the laughter. Samuel had not exposed his identity for pride, but to teach a lesson. And in that moment, Clara saw him not as a janitor, not even as a CEO, but as a man of quiet strength and dignity. The rest of the dinner was no longer awkward. It was heartfelt. Clara listened as Samuel shared stories, not of wealth or business, but of struggle. He had started at the very bottom, cleaning floors to pay for his siblings' education, often going without food himself. He had worked for years, unseen, until he built something of his own. And even after success, he would still return to his old roles sometimes.